tutorial on the limbic system. You'll be watching this at home in the next couple of days, and so I wanted to get through just a couple of slides of the importance of the limbic system. And we can often think of the limbic system as really regulating a lot of emotion-driven behaviors, and it's the border between the old brain and the new brain. So up to this point, we've really only talked about the old brain, which was like the brain stem with the pons and the medulla and the cerebellum, the little brain. But now we're going to get into higher level brain functioning. But the limbic system is kind of like these few brain structures that are still helping higher level brain functioning, but assisting in some of the lower brain functioning, if you will. And what I mean by lower brain functioning is just the basic functioning, like swallowing, walking, talking, breathing, all of those basic things. It often regulates emotion and our motivated behaviors. And so we're going to talk about 3 structures in particular. Again, I think these would be 3 good structures to try to incorporate into your project, because everybody is going to be familiar with how that could work into our everyday lives, or whether it's a book or with the project of how a person would behave in these everyday situations. So the amygdala, and maybe you can see the amygdala right there. It's like that little purple kind of lima bean shaped structure. That is linked to emotion, especially fear. Now this is a good one to know, because the amygdala helps in our fight or flight regulation. It essentially gets us ready, if you will, for fight or flight to respond to that situation. And so if we think about the amygdala, have you ever thought of being like frozen with fear? That's because the amygdala is really kind of on overdrive. But the same is true if you were, running from a bear or whatever it happened to be. So the amygdala is a very important, very small but very important brain structure. The hypothalamus. Now, if you know anything about like root words and base words and prefixes and suffixes, you know that the word hypothalamus means below. And we want to think about this. You remember where the thalamus was? Remember that gateway for all of our sensory information? If the hypothalamus lies below the thalamus. So if you can think about it that way, remember the limbic system is kind of the gateway, if you will, or the border in between the lower brain systems and the higher brain systems, higher brain functioning. And the hypothalamus, though, is extremely important, especially in basic functioning. It directs our eating, our body temperature, it directs our pulse, our blood pressure, our heart rate. So many different things are directed by the hypothalamus. It keeps our body in a state of homeostasis. And you've probably heard that word, and maybe you know what it is. Homeostasis is, we don't want to have our blood pressure too high, because then we're going to have a stroke. But we don't want our blood pressure to be too low, because then we're going to pass out. We don't want our temperature to be too high. We don't want our temperature to be too low. So the hypothalamus kind of tries to regulate our body. So think of the shivers. If you have the shivers, that's your hypothalamus telling your body to warm up. Your body's not warm enough. It's literally directing that involuntary movement. You can't control shivers. That involuntary movement to equalize your body temperature. It helps govern our endocrine system via the pituitary gland. We will talk a lot about the pituitary gland, but chances are, if you have, there's lots of issues that can happen with the hypothalamus, but if you have say, issues with like you're gaining weight and you can't figure out why, your doctor is probably going to start looking at your pituitary gland and or your hypothalamus, because there's probably something going on there that isn't regulating itself properly. And when we talk about the endocrine system and hormones and everything, we'll talk a lot about the pituitary gland. So more to come on that later. The hypothalamus is also linked to emotion and reward. Now, I can't talk about this, but I got to tell you a little story. So what we know by the hypothalamus of doing testing and trials, and again, this is something that we have to think: was that ethical? Is it right? But what we know that we've learned is that they've done trials on those critters that I don't like to talk about, that scurry and run around and sometimes they're in the locker room, like I can't talk about it. But they've done trials on those, and they artificially stimulated the hypothalamus, like literally put a little probe on to like stimulate the hypothalamus, and said rodent was so like happy, like was stimulated in such a happy, rewarding way that it literally died. Like they stimulated the brain, like the hypothalamus, like 7,000 times, and this rodent died. And so we can understand that it has a lot to do with just that idea of homeostasis. Like you can't be that happy. You can't have that much reward and stimulation, because you're going to literally exhaust yourself and die. And so the hypothalamus helps with that kind of control. One thing, if you notice, I have the little check mark here on the, if you come to the AP test and you don't have a clue of what the answer is, but one of the choices is the hypothalamus, choose the hypothalamus. It's often the right answer, because the hypothalamus really does a lot for the body. So it's always a good bet to try the hypothalamus if you don't have any other idea. All right, and the last slide then, the hippocampus. I guess I can move my cursor down this way a little bit. The hippocampus is responsible for processing our conscious memories. Now, when I say conscious memories, we talked about this a little bit like when we talked about the cerebellum, the little brain, but the hippocampus is a higher level of memories, you might want to say, the conscious memories. So for instance, what you did on your 7th birthday party or something like that. How you drive, that's a good one, how you drive from your house to your best friend's house. Those are the type of conscious memories that the hippocampus would help direct and control. It also, when there's damage to the hippocampus, we lose our ability to form new memories of facts or events. So for instance, in Alzheimer's disease, we see kind of a breakdown of especially the ACH, the acetylcholine, in the hippocampus. And so we know that there's a strong link. Correlation does not mean causation, but there is a strong link between the hippocampus breakdown and Alzheimer's disease. So things like long-term memory, the way I try to get you to remember the hippocampus and memory is imagine a hippo sitting around a campfire telling stories. I mean, think of that just kind of like, at the lake in the summer, if you have a lake place, or, just in your backyard or whatever, and you are having a campfire and it's really just relaxing, and you can recall those fun times or recall those good memories. Think of the hippocampus like that. It's an easy way to remember. Think of a hippo sitting around a campfire making memories, telling stories. So that's what I wanted to let you know today. It's short and sweet. This next slide would be a really good one to know. It shows you, we haven't got to the cortex yet, to the cerebral cortex, but we will. all those other ones, thalamus, hypothalamus. We'll talk about the pituitary gland, reticular formation, spinal cord, cerebellum. All those we've already talked to. One thing I will mention is the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is that, you see that little area? This is what connects the right and left hemisphere. Now, all the information that we get in our body, whether it's sensory information, motor information, whatever it happens to be, crosses our hemisphere. And so the corpus callosum is what kind of helps our brain talk to the other side. The right hand side of us has to talk to our left side of the brain, and the left hand side of us has to talk to the right side of our brain. So it helps that transmission of information to go from one side of the brain to the other. So other than that, I think I've kind of talked about everything, and keep those in mind. Study that, get to know it, especially the functioning and how those parts of the brain work. So until next time, see you later. Bye.